Hey, hey, hey. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. Listen, I am so glad y'all here. This week has been interesting. It's one of my first weeks trying not to look into darkness. Or well, let me see, how did Paul's quote go? Look into the darkness, but don't stare. But I did happen to catch that two of our representatives were arguing with each other on the floor, specifically Representative Jasmine Crockett and Representative Nancy Mace. The what I think is interesting about what's currently happening with the topic of DEI is that it is so easy and intellectually lazy to just say, DEI must die or that it's bad. And I know that when I was specifically working on just helping leaders to understand that you don't get to control diversity when you especially when you're leading in a school. The people who are there are representative of the people who live in the community. In many districts you have to live where you work. The same is true for several municipalities, for the firefighters. That you got to work where you got to live where you work. And so who you end up working with is truly an indication of who kind of lives in your area. So when I think about this idea that diversity is a bad thing, it's like, what are you going to do to change it? If I get two people together, even a married couple, even siblings, even identical twins, they are not the same. And diversity simply means difference. And I think sometimes we demonstrate our ignorance. And I mean that in the definition of the word when we use diversity and what we mean is race or what we mean is gender or what we mean is sexual orientation. Nobody is normal and everybody else is, somehow adjacent to that. But with that, I'm so glad for the people who happen to pay attention and follow this series every Friday, because if there's one bit of lexicon I use every week, is child. And if you're not familiar with the term discourse marker, you might not be familiar that a lot of different cultures use terms to break up their speech. If you think about Valley Girl language, you'll hear words like. I was doing such and such a girl and it's a way to break up the speech. It is very common in the Southern United States to say, child, please, or child. And I think Ocho Cinco was one of the first people that made it popularized that, yeah, Black people have a different set of discourse markers. Because when I'm talking to my girlfriends, they might say, yeah, we were walking down the street, this, that, and the third. And it's just a way to break up the speech, or, and whatnot. I mean, these are just things that we say. What was glaringly obvious for me as I was watching the discourse between uh, Jasmine Crockett and Nancy Mace was that I had a set of biases about people in the South that everybody in the South knows that child please is a discourse marker and not actually calling someone a juvenile term. And honey, was I wrong? And one thing that is important when you consider just not just exposure, what you're exposed to, but also who you have an opportunity to experience, even if it's just through social media. These things make you smarter. I cannot imagine that there's anyone who listens to Filter Free Friday weekly who wouldn't understand when someone says child please or child, that is simply Black people using discourse markers. That's it. We just breaking up our speech. It's not calling anybody anything. Another discourse marker that I use often is, girl, listen. I will often say it when I'm talking to someone who is distinctly male, and it's not that I'm calling them a girl, it is simply a discourse marker. And I think if we want to, I don't know, maybe my bias is that I think people want to be smarter. Maybe people value being ignorant and uninformed. At this point I don't know. But I watched the video and it appeared that Nancy Mace was sincerely like, what, offended. And when she said, "Let's take this outside," I was like, "See, I just used like just then." I just don't understand how someone in South Carolina doesn't understand the language or the lexicon, child please. And so I invite folks, if there's something that you feel very strongly about, if there's certain kinds of people that you're going to be engaging with, we can't control what we get exposed to. When I'm driving down the street, the billboards I see, today the Kansas City Star chose to, homicides were down last year by 20%. The headline in the article said, let me make sure I get it right, chat, because I don't want to say the wrong thing. How violence soared in Kansas City despite fewer homicides in 2024. Yeah, non-fatal shootings were up. They're up all over the country. That headline makes it sound like that homicides are up. I live in the Northland, and I'm regularly engaged with people who just think, oh my God, if you go to the city, that somehow you just gonna get massacred. Our homicides for this time compared to this time last year are way up. We're at like 9, and this time last year we had 1. And what's interesting is half of those homicides are in the Northland, but it's Northlanders who are afraid to go to the city. And you can't control those exposures very much. You can turn off the TV, you can turn off the news and say to yourself, you're not going to care about these things, but you probably are going to see somewhere, even if you just go to the movies or even if you just read children's books, these things that elevate certain characteristics and discount others. But once you have had exposures for which you cannot control, now my question is, what experiences have you had that either validate what your exposure has been or gives you another level of insight that makes you smarter? Because I could not help but think, oh my gosh, how ignorant. Like, I just did it again. Be Support whatever legislators you want to support. I'm not in the business of telling people who they need to support. But not understanding you're in the South and you are an elected official in the South and you don't understand Southern lexicon is fascinating to me. Fascinating. Fascinating to me. Like what? See, another discourse marker. Everyone uses discourse markers. Black people have our own set of discourse markers that in no way demonstrate any kind of disrespect intended or inferred. And so when I'm not exactly sure what we need to do from a leadership and development perspective to help people with their language, especially when you have half of our voting body. I don't really know what half of the country thinks, but half of our voting body clearly thinks that DEI is like the devil. What do you do? Because you could have all white men who are heterosexual on your team, and you still could have a diversity problem around things like thought. In fact, some of the most homogeneous spaces that I've been in have diversity problems. People don't know how to get along around just communication and trust and conflict and decision making. And when you add in identities like race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, those things, then it makes it even more complicated and adds a different layer of difference that you have to consider if you want to get the best out of your team. I said this one time to somebody and they were like, Silicon Valley is one of the most homogenous places in the globe and they're very innovative. And so therefore they thought it was causal. They're like, okay, so therefore you don't need diversity in order to be effective. Okay, well, what I will say is true that when things are all the same, it's easier. I don't know if I can say is more effective. And the reason I like sports is because you can say whatever you want to say about phenotype. And it always gets dispelled when the rules are clear, when the standards are the same, and when the rules change in ways that are unfair. You have an entire fan base that screams bloody murder. And I wish everything were that way, because yes, if I just work with my best friend and she and I can complete each other's sentences, things are going to be easier. That yes, we might be more innovative on the surface because we can move fast. What is as true or more true is that we sharpen our saw when someone is there who does not think like us, who asks us different questions, who causes us to think beyond what our typical is. Those people who we have to actually prepare because we know they're going to give us questions. It's a it's a sharpening of the saw that makes you smarter. And I don't know if we understand sometimes how our language causes these we look on a massive scale and say, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe so and so did or said whatever." But our everyday language makes things possible sometimes. Here's what I mean. We have been just repeating over and over and over again. You don't need a college degree. You don't need a college degree. You don't need a college degree. Well, yeah, you don't need a college degree. Nobody needs a college degree. Um, some people don't want a college degree, and both of those things are fine. But when you consistently say you don't need a college degree, people translate in that to mean you don't need a college degree for anything. And I'm sorry, my loves, you better hope that your welder has gone to somebody's school to learn how to weld somewhere, even if it's informal or not, because some stuff gonna fall apart if that's not the case. You better hope that the person who, when you get cancer, is sitting there trying to tell you what the possible solutions are. You better hope that they have something more than just hanging out with me in Lincoln High School to be able to help you. You better hope that the people who putting your car together, who know what the thickness of your wheels are supposed to be and what the velocity is of the air around that car, you better hope those people have some additional education beyond just hanging out and bouncing ideas off of each other. It is fascinating when you watch these these wildfires in California, how people are like, oh my gosh, this is just the city, reduce the amount of funds for the fire department. You have firefighters actually on television who have been working in the firefighting space forever, saying that, listen, things were moving so fast, but from 5 minutes, a little brush fire to just sweeping down hills, and that you would have needed 26,000 fire trucks to address it. No municipality has 26,000 fire trucks. That would be ridiculous. And folks out here like, well, fire that mayor, who's the mayor of Los Angeles, but not of all of Orange County or Southern California. Like, expand your circle, expand your circle. There are things that you can just plug in the chat GPT. There are things you can just Google. There are many things that information like right here, but we are to a point where we're information rich and just like action poor. And it almost seems like the more information we have, the less compassionate we are. And I don't know if that's what was intended. We got a long road in front of us, because I maintain that leadership, especially at the highest level of an organization, you think about your own organization, your own house, signals to everybody else how to be. And if this is the signaling we want, yelling and screaming, I ain't no little girl and all of that because somebody used the discourse marker, child, I got my seatbelt buckled up, but I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if it's going to be able to hold up. Because one thing I know for sure is that I'm not about to follow this train wreck every day, all day, because it is just, look, I did all I could to get the outcome I wanted, and it didn't happen. So here we are. And in your places where you work and where you live, my only invitation is to you, sugar. If you don't want to be out here sounding stupid, make sure that you are at least experiencing other kinds of people so that you know what you're talking about. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. We got plenty work to do.